Give me a second.
No, well, that's all right. But basically, can you start, Gloria, and sharing with us what are our lessons? Dr. Bachman?
Sorry, there was somebody ringing and really
So
like,
could you just share with us what we're doing for the women in terms of the nurse navigation, healthcare navigation, both as to OBGYN and heart disease?
well, I think the most important is to put it in perspective, and that is that if any one of us on this line had a high blood pressure, we would have no idea that we have it. And unfortunately, it's responsible for 40% of deaths that occur in the US population. And
Can I ask everybody if they could kindly mute themselves? Thank you. Thanks so much.
so that it's really the most prevalent cause of death in the United States. And 20% of us don't even know we have it because we don't have the ability to have our blood pressure monitored or taken. And even those that have high blood pressure, about 25% do not have it under control. And I think the good news is that when your blood pressure is under control, that your incidence of stroke, of heart attack, of all types of adverse outcomes are reduced tremendously, so that you're not going to have a heart attack, you're not going to have a stroke. And I think the most important aspect that I see is that, giving the women some control. And that, again, and I know that these are just some of my thoughts, and Kristen, please, chime in, but we probably, like in many pharmacies, have a blood pressure cuff in the eating areas. That would be really important. Since walking is so important, I looked up some of the ways that one can monitor their walking.
Doctor, can I just ask, so when you're meeting with the women at Edna Mahan,
yes,
could you just talk specifically as to both their cardiac challenges, this being Heart Month, and then secondarily, perhaps some of the OBGYN challenges?
Challenges are, number one is, how do they monitor their heart health? How do they know that they have high blood pressure? And that's why I was really looking at what can we do to bring that to the forefront. And so the best ways to bring it to the forefront is obviously having accessibility of blood pressure cuffs at Aetna. And I'd like to hear the response to that, of having a cheap pedometer that I could wear, that Governor McGreevey could wear, to monitor that you're doing the 6,000 steps, because many are not doing the walking that they're doing. And that's so key. Also, monitoring blood glucose, because we know that with high glucose levels, or pre-diabetes, diabetes, not even needing any medication, but you can monitor it so that you could revise your diet. I don't know if I'm addressing, Jim, what you want me to address, but
no, that's good. And I mean, I think what we're trying to do is, and I think what Gloria has done, is linking women at Edna Mahan to both a survey, a healthcare survey, and when they're released to Edna Mahan, to link to cardiologists. My dear friend, Dr. Chris Burnell just joined us. Thank you, Doc. To linking them to healthcare, OBGYN care, and general diagnostic screenings. So what we find, to go to what Dr. Bachman said, is that the women at Edna Mahan and Chris, and I know Dr. Wang are joining us, could just jump in, is the women frequently don't know whether they are or are not at heart risk. And because they have not had regular blood pressure screenings, they've not been engaged in cardiological visits, and that's what we're trying to do. Chris, did you want to add anything? Sure.
No, I would just say, just in general, it's not unusual that this population of women won't know their risk for heart disease, because across multiple populations, women at the age of 20 begin to form risk factors and early stages of disease, and it's unknown to them. So this is why education is important. This is why services are important, especially with a population that's just as impacted because they'll have more barriers to care.
Sure.
And
And
the
I
one
just
thing,
wanted to add and call upon the good senator is that what we're doing is every woman who comes out of Edna Mahan is given a healthcare survey with Dr. Bachman and her team. And Dr. Bachman is the director of the Institute of Women's Health at Robert Wood Johnson Medical School. But the goal is to connect every single woman to a cardiologist and then have screenings through the LaFrac Wellness Center at our training center. But there are two major areas. One is obviously this is Heart Month, but then secondly, Doc, just talk briefly about some of the challenges that we have found recently on OBGYN and some of the challenges that the women have candidly, and I'll just say bluntly, not even due to the Department of Corrections. Part of it is access to healthcare, part of it is knowledge, but Dr. Bachman has found different women not fully understanding the changing nature of their own development. Doctor?
exactly. And I think what I'd like to just really emphasize is that so many women have had stress, traumatic stress, abuse, etc., that they're fearful of having a pelvic exam, which is the best way to pick up cervical cancer. So we're missing a lot of cervical cancer when they don't have their pap tests. We're missing a lot of the fibroids that are causing very heavy bleeding, and they're becoming quite anemic. So they're weak, they're fatigued all the time. They may not be getting enough iron in their diet. They may not be taking a supplement. So these are some of the issues that they're dealing with. And I think the other issue that we could discuss is some of them also express wanting pregnancy. And obviously, if one is incarcerated at age 35 and gets out at age 55, there's obviously no opportunity for pregnancy. And the last issue that I'd be happy to answer questions is the issues of perimenopausal, menopausal symptoms that so many women are extremely distressed with hot flushes, night sweats, mood changes, sleep disturbances, irregular menses where they can't really understand what's going on. It'll be very heavy one month, very light another month. And they also have a lot of lower genital symptoms from it, including irritation and dryness in the external genital area, which is what I hear.
Thank you. And Lace, can you just put up the what we've sending to all women, because it's important that all of our women understand that what triggers or the symptoms for women's heart attack are uniquely different from men's. Lace, can you put that up? Thank you. And this is so just to understand the distinct differences between how men and women experience heart attacks. Men, it's traditionally the shortness of breath, the jaw, neck pain, nausea, and vomiting. But you can see for women, there are many other symptoms that may not be traditionally understood. And so our goal is to provide for all of the women as they're returning home an information, if you will, a baseline, and also sharing with them heart treatment tips on a wide range of areas. So thanks, Lace. I just wanted to have everyone understand, and I want to thank Dr. Bachman, is that NJRC provides, and I can't thank Dr. Bachman enough, and Dr. Chris Burnell and Dr. Wang, but NJRC provides for screenings, diagnostic screenings, and provides for education. So I just want to say thank you. And I also want to thank our dear friend Iris Cooney. Iris, oh, and here's Dr. Wang. Iris, because Dr. Wang is just walked out of her patient. And doctor, could you just share what we're doing with the women now?
Can I just add one thing, that New Jersey Reentry is known nationally, that we're asked to speak at national meetings about what we are doing in New Jersey, because it really is pioneering many of the opportunities that we give to the individuals who are incarcerated and on their reentry. So we're really being recognized.
Thank you, doctor. And Dr. Wang, could you share what we're doing on hepatitis B and C and HIV?
Yeah, and I think this is also will be like a model of care too for other programs. I think it's often been neglected actually for women, just hepatitis B, C, HIV services. And I think oftentimes it gets thought of like it only affects marginalized populations, but it really is an issue in incarceration. And a lot of times people will come in to jails and prisons without Hep C, but then they'll leave with it. So it's really considered what we call a key population, where if we want to eliminate hepatitis B and C globally, we have to be able to do it in incarcerated populations and reentry populations. So we're working with NJCRI. They're a well-known group in the New Jersey area. They do great work providing hepatitis screenings and excellent linkage to care through telehealth. And their goal when we met with them was really just to remove all barriers for patients. And I just love this. Like, they make it easy for patients to get tested. They do a rapid point of care test. So right away, people know their results. If they have hepatitis C, they're able to do blood work to get the viral load the exact same day. They set up a telehealth consultation with an infectious disease specialist who's well known in the field. And then their goal is to get medication to these women within 2 weeks. And their pharmacy that they work with is really, really patient-centered. They will deliver medications anywhere. They can deliver to a shelter. They can deliver to the streets. And they counsel these women through it. I mean, I was so impressed with what they're able to provide, and they're willing to go to all of the sites for NJRC, right? It sounded like quite a number of sites, Jim, you guys were able to set up for. So we're really excited about this partnership. And they were excited to meet with NJRC because they were saying this is a population they have not been able to reach. So I think this is really perfect, two organizations that realize their missions align. So I'm looking forward to seeing these results.
So I just want to say thank you to Dr. Bachman. I want to say thank you to Dr. Purnell, Dr. Wang. And before we move on, so it's under Dr. Bachman's leadership at RWJ Medical School, and God bless her, with Chris goes up to Edna Mahan every month.
Yes.
Every month, and sort of collects the survey forms, corresponds with the women, and thanks to my friend Chris Purnell and Dr. Wang, then connects women to individual doctors, whether it's OBGYN, whether it's heart disease, and now hepatitis B, C, and HIV. So I just wanted to say thank you to each. And I didn't know whether anybody had any questions before we move on. And I also want to shout out the great Senator Angela McKnight. So as well, join us. Senator Ruiz?
I have a question. So just because it could help us, the senator and myself, if in fact, we know that this is an issue and that it's pressing, and you're doing a lot of good work in this space, but is there an opportunity for us to legislatively build in this these checkpoints as part of intake? Not solely at the state correctional facility, but we have other county correctional facilities where I want to be sure that the women in those spaces, even though it's a much shorter time that's being spent, but if we're identifying these as crisis issues, right? And it's so for Black and brown women, all these touch points, whether you're in I think Dr. Purnell was getting to this, we face these issues, whether we're incarcerated or not. But since it's a more of controlled environment, I feel like we could be more proactive by making this part of kind of like the regimen of the time when you're in the facility of care. If there's a way that we can regulate this or legislate this, I don't want to speak for you, Senator McKnight, but I would suspect that with our conversations that you and I have had, this is something that we can lean into. Just a food for thought.
That is a great point, Teresa.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so just so you know, Senator, and I'm not pandering to the audience, but I am, Essex County already does this. And thanks to the leadership of Phil Elijah, and we do this in Essex County Jail, and thanks to Chris, Dr. Purnell, Chris sort of beat the drum, as you just did, about the importance of these diagnostic tests. Helena can basically enunciate, but we don't do it automatically in NJDOC. They only do it when individuals are symptomatic, say, for example, on hepatitis B and C, particularly on cardiology. So maybe what we can do is Dr. Wang and Dr. Bachman and Dr. Purnell, perhaps I'd ask the three of you if you could perhaps form just an ad hoc committee that we could make recommendations to Senators Ruiz and McKnight, particularly for Edna Mahan.
Absolutely.
And Sue, does that make sense?
Yeah, and there are other states that do it, so I think there's models that we can follow, definitely for screening on intake and things like that.
Yeah, I was going to say, 'cause screening, all preventive measures are an area where we're lacking, specifically in the US. And then if you drill down further in Black and Brown communities, and then if you drill down further in justice impacted populations. So whatever we can do to form assurance, right? That's a word that I want everyone to start to get very comfortable with when we talk about health equity issues, and this is a health equity issue. It's the assurance that people have the opportunity to develop and form optimal health. And so what the senator is speaking about is how do you create that assurance, and would be happy to weigh into that.
And I
And
think
I
the
just
other thing
wanna-
is that
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
women do want some of their own independence. And as I said, many of them would love to have some type of a blood pressure monitor that they can monitor their own blood pressure when they go for meals, that they could have a pedometer to be sure that they're getting their 6,000 steps every day. That for the diabetics, there's the glucose monitors that they could wear. If we could provide them, they would feel more assured that they're taking some control of their health. And I think the other is just having groups, just like the gardening group, the women getting together on a regular basis who have hypertension or who have diabetes to discuss their obstacles. And because when we go to Aetna, we ask what are the obstacles, and they tell us, and that's why when we're addressing them. And this, I think, would be a great way to give some independence to the women.
Sophia had a question, and then my dear friend Helena.
Hi. So I was just wondering, I work
Sophia,
for,
could you just introduce yourself so everybody knows who the lovely Sophia is?
of course. Hello, my name is Sophia. I work for Miss Francine Lafrac. I do a lot of her marketing and her communications.
Yep.
So I was wondering, I'm aware that we're doing hepatitis screenings at the center. Are there any specific statistics or stories that we're able to share?
Sure,
with
we can get
everybody?
all of those to you, Sophia. And I
Perfect.
just want to say thank you to Sophia and Francine Lafrac for funding. They just generously donated money for micro grants so that we can give to women in stress if they need an apartment for a night, if they need a blood test or a screening, if they need a screening for a job. So I just want to say, but Sophia, yeah, we can provide you with all those. Helena,
Perfect. Thank you.
Commissioner?
Good morning. This is a wonderful conversation. My name's Elena Tomei. I'm from the Department of Corrections, Assistant Commissioner of Women's Services. So Dr. Bachman, always thank you for coming. You are absolutely fantastic. The women love having you there. And this year, 2024, is a year where we want to focus on women's health. Medical has been a focus point of ours. We actually just changed our health services unit to be a health compliance unit, which has brought up some concerns that we have addressed, like monthly mammograms and GYN visits. That said, I'm very interested in taking part of a conversation to see if we can do something to expand what is already done at initial screening through medical. So I appreciate the conversation because we all know, for those of us who are women, not only is it different sometimes with our medical issues, but sometimes we just don't put ourselves first.
So, well, Commissioner, we'll keep you apprised, and
That would be
what we'll do is
fantastic.
we'll do with Dr. Wang and Dr. Purnell and Dr. Bachman, and we'll keep DOC looped. But I also see Senator McKnight had her hand up. Ange?
Yeah. Hi. So Dr. Botman, you bring up a great point, and just for some food for thought for the commissioner, maybe there are stations inside of the system where you see a glucose, or you see where they can go and check their blood pressure. So, just as well as you go to the restroom, you need to get a sanitary napkin. There's something that's hanging there. So maybe within the facility, there are different stations where they can go and check how many steps they've done to date, just because of safety purposes. You don't want them to, have these items walking freely, but you can also just have them stationed throughout the facility. So just some food for thought.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting, and perhaps if NJDOC ultimately allows us, Senator, perhaps we can have someone philanthropically contribute to have a pedometer. So it's something we can talk to the Francine Lefrak Foundation. And I'm just going to wrap up this section with my dear friend Iris, who we love. I'm not shilling for Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield, but they've been a tremendous ally in providing for our women.
Thanks.
Aye.
Thank you, Governor. Good morning, everyone. Excellent.
And by the way, Iris, also make sure that all of our clients have health insurance. And as they move from Medicaid and family care, they move to Obamacare, and that they're registered. And I can't thank them enough. I could talk about my rates, but that's something else. But go ahead.
Well, thanks for the conversation. I think I would add not only training the individuals to monitor their steps and know what their blood pressure is outside of a clinical environment, but also how to translate that when they do see their provider, right? Those tools, those self-advocacy tools that they can leverage in a clinical environment, or at least to get an advocate with them to help them in that process, because we all know that once we are exposed in like an operatory with doctors and in a vulnerable state, our communication skills are lackluster, to say the least, right? So I think we need to not only provide those tools to identify preemptively, but the language needs to be integrated.
Thanks, Iris, and I appreciate that. To be sharing the documentation. Last thing is before I move on to Senator Ruiz and next steps, Gloria, could you just share just briefly what you've done nationally in terms of, and what we've done in terms of the educational videos for all of our women? These videos are great. Go ahead, Gloria.
We've actually put together many abstracts, posters, presentations that have been given regarding New Jersey Reentry Corporation. We've also put together videos that describe how women should, and this was brought up already, address their healthcare provider, so that, and I'll just give one example, which we do talk about with the women, that they have the right to say, stop. That if someone's doing a speculum exam for a PAP and they're uncomfortable, that stop, because then we can put together some other ways of doing it, including, just putting some analgesic there and so forth and so on. So we really have been leaders in, and we have a list of publications of the professional journals that have actually used our work to educate others.
Thank you, Doctor. And so again, we're gonna create this ad hoc committee with Dr. Bachman, Dr. Purnell, and Dr. Wang at Senator Ruiz's and Senator McKnight's suggestion, and we'll develop a list of preferred diagnostic tests. I mean, bluntly, considering, and Dr. Wang will say this, the high propensity of women and men with hepatitis in the court-involved system. I just want, NJDOC will treat people that are symptomatic, but as Dr. Wang says, there's a spike among court-involved populations, and particularly brown and black communities. And I won't belabor the point, but we think that diagnostic screenings for hepatitis B and C is so critically important. So we're excited about this initiative, doing it outside of when people come, but we believe it should be done, as Dr. Wang said, people go into prison without hepatitis and they come out with it. So again, I want to thank Dr. Wang from RWJ Barnabas. I want to thank my dear friend, Dr. Chris Burnell and Dr. Bachman. And the next person is not only a great advocate for women, a great advocate for individuals in the community, but somebody who's hands-on and has been on the forefront of driving change with my dear friend, Senator Sandra Baldwin Cunningham, and now Senator McKnight. And so we're really honored to have Senator Ruiz here from the 29th District. And so I'd like, and I don't hold this against her, she's a friend of Allison Asatella. We all have a cross to bear. my dear friend Allison, but I'd like to call upon somebody who's really special, an indefatigable advocate for women and children in this space, Senator Teresa Ruiz. Barb, thanks, Senator.
Thank you, Governor. And I'm glad you mentioned Allison because I recruited her to the ad hoc committee that's going to work on legislation because nobody has more.
She's already on 3 committees with me.
So she's done. Nobody has more expertise than she has had. And she and I did a volume of good work. For all of you who don't know me on the call, my name is Teresa Ruiz. I represent the greatest city in the Garden State. That's the city of Newark.
The second greatest city.
We're still number one. We're still number one, McGreevy. We're still number one. You just gave me a flashback with the conversations I used to have with Sandy because we always used to joke, Jersey City, Newark, Jersey City, Newark, all in good fun. And I have Harrison and East Newark. I chaired the education committee for over a decade. And for me, I think when we talk about criminal justice system and education, they're intimately tied together. And that's why my focus has always been on ed. The more proactive common sense approaches we have on that side, the smaller these roundtable organizations will get, the better the outcomes will be for people reaching their 100% God-given potential and therefore doing away with circumstances that come out of lives that have been stricken by obstacles or stress or trauma that could have been preventative if in fact we are committed to truth, honesty, and giving everyone an equitable footing at the beginning of their life. That being said, for me, women in the correctional facility has been a point of just, I don't know how to describe it, but something that I've leaned into. And particularly, Allison, I guess it was after I had my daughter, was really the moment, the pivotal moment in time. When you're home and you think about all the stressors that you have in your life, and then you start thinking about the different constituencies that you represent, conversations started coming up. Do women in our correctional facilities, do they have access to pumping machines? If in fact they're coming in and delivering, can they do that contact for breastfeeding? I mean, that was the major focus when we started working on really a whole slew of women in the incarceration system through a lens of programming and resources. Unfortunately, I feel like that happened at a time when DOC was under turmoil. There were changes in leadership, then COVID hit, and then fortunately we have who I believe is a phenomenal commissioner leading that department, who happens to be a woman and really understands this conversation through a different and more phenomenal lens, in my opinion. But I still am hopeful for the following things. We know that the more time that a human being spends with their children while they're incarcerated, the rate of recidivism drops down, the trauma to the child and the family gets lessened, that we really have to think about better strategic ways to be sure that we are providing every avenue for family unification. When Enna Mahan's, and I can't report on the future of what it is because I'm not sure of what's precisely happening there, but I always wanted and envisioned more of a 2 or 3 location site. And the goal for me in saying that was because the closer the woman in the correctional facility is to her family members, the better the programming we can create. There are institutions throughout the country, and Allison and I were slated to head to Illinois at some point to see some of these programs before the pandemic, and that derailed our trip, is that there are facilities that are providing that after school homework time.
Yep.
With children, that there are facilities that are doing more with mothers and nursing mothers and babies, that there are facilities, but it has to do with geographic location. And so I am hopeful that regardless as to what ultimately is the final product for Ennaman, that somehow we figure out a way, whether if they're geographically located in one setting, that we can somehow do strategic geographic programming throughout the state to create better unification with children and families. The second thing that the commissioner and I just recently spoke about was the inequity when it comes to men and women who are incarcerated, in the sense that opportunities for women to get furloughed and move into more of a structured house environment. And so I think that's going to require some legislative action. I know it's a topic that is, and anyone who's an expertise in this, weigh in if I'm saying something wrong, because I'm only giving you through the lens of love today as to why I'm working on these pieces of legislation. I think it's a topic that when we start talking about it publicly, people are going to automatically run and say, well, you're trying to move a murderer into a halfway house and changing the whole thing. But let's really peel back and figure out, why did that woman commit a crime? Was she abused for 20 years? Was she in self-defense? I mean, we still know that structurally our criminal justice system, when it comes to women who are incarcerated really because of DV, have gotten the short end of the stick. And so having a deep dive and an honest conversation about what can we do better to make sure that people are housed in the most appropriate places, and that we're doing everything in our best interest to A, reduce recidivism, if that's one, B, make sure that there's family reunification, providing the most quality services in the facility so that when someone leaves, they are as best prepared as possible. When I think about this, and we have a correctional facility, my full-time job is one of the chiefs of staff for Essex County, and we have a correctional facility here. So when we think about all of the great things that the Reentry organization is doing, and that all of you are doing in this space, it doesn't matter what we do. Just think about being locked in a space for a year and feeling so unstable the first day that they tell you that you can exit that premise. It doesn't matter if you were in there and it was the best program and you got education and you got all of this. It's just a shift in your outlook and in your life that has to be extraordinary. And that's why it's key that all those other levers that we have, when people are in our custody, that we're providing as the best of our ability, because that first step out into public is so unstable just because of the nature of being incarcerated. And so that's all I have, Governor. I don't know if you have any questions.
No, and Senator, and I think Allison, and we had a group of Seton Hall University law students researched this, and we did a report, and we saw three things that I think were noteworthy. That one, women's sentences are disproportionately long compared to men. It's particularly excessive nationwide, and it's been documented not only by the Seton Hall University law students, but in law journals across the nation. Second is our concern, and I think your concern, that family reunification at best happens in non-incarceral settings. So that one of the areas that we had thought was to look at something along the lines of the MAP program, where it was traditionally used for a mutual agreement program for addiction and mental health, but perhaps use domestic violence, maybe a third area. And third, and I think this was shown by the Seton Hall law students, and I think Allison will verify, is that in many of these cases, particularly where women commit aggravated assault and in fact homicide, is that they are reacting to domestic violence, prolonged cases of domestic violence, for which was never reported. And now those mitigating factors are actually not incorporated in sentencing, and part of which contributes to the inexorably long sentences that women confront. And so we had a great report. I want to thank former Dean of the Law School, Catherine Buzang, who participated. But I mean, I think the challenge for us, and Al or Nafisa, anybody wants to jump in, and some of the women on this call are women who themselves have been incarcerated. It's frustrating that the duration of the sentence, the inability, despite DOC, to be fair, their efforts to provide for a family-friendly environment is so difficult in an incarceral setting. And then also to be mindful of the history of domestic abuse, and ironically, that being the predicate for the crime, but the inability to use that as a mitigating factor, frankly, because it wasn't reported. So all of that is to say, we on this call to answer your charge that we'd like to be the rebuttal for those individuals saying this is an inappropriate diversion to a residential based setting outside the incarceration. I think the women on this call strongly would support you. Well, everyone on this call would strongly support you in those efforts. Does anybody want to just share while we have the good senator here? And you know, Senator McKnight, does anybody have any questions?
Well, can I jump in on that, Jim?
Sure. Could you just introduce yourself? Thanks.
Yes, I most certainly will. Hello, everyone. My name is Nafisa Goldsmith, and I am the Community Outreach Specialist for the Department of Corrections. I must say to you, Senator Ruiz, if I did not know any better, I would have thought you were speaking from personal experience, especially when you speak to that first step out of the door, right? I am someone who has experienced that first step out of the door. And even though I had supports, right? I had family, I had friends, I had, you know, community supports. I was in a halfway house, right? I was going to community college, but that first step out of the door was one where I was totally thrown off, right? And I was thrown off because of how society changed so much, right? Things are not what they were, not even a year ago. So imagine someone spending a decade, 2 decades away, right? And not receiving the care that they, you know, and I love that you said the best care. You did not say adequate and you did not say humane. You said the best care. And there is something that I am hearing, and I want to stress this. I've heard when individuals go home, when the women go home, the type of care that they could receive through the program. But let's just be very, very honest here. And Senator, you mentioned honesty. Many individuals are not going home. They don't have a home. So let's think about that, right? Where are they going? It's not always home. And when we talk about families and family reunification, that is us giving a default assumption that these families were unified once before when many of them were never. They were already broken.
I think, and this is an important conversation, but I think that if I could truncate, the focus is what can we do to divert women from Edna Mahan? And so I think the real challenge.
Language is one of those things. We need to start with language.
Sure.
And how we talk about it.
What we're looking for, is there a residential alternative that, particularly for women that have a history of suffering from abuse, sexual violence, battering, is there a physical alternative to Edna Mahan? And I think, and I would love, Nafisa is an old friend of mine, but I would love to have you engaged in that. But I mean, our goal is to go to what Senator Ruiz said, both for the sake of family reunification, for the sake of the children, for the sake of the women, is to have an alternative, the same way that Department of Corrections, thanks to Governor Kane, how many years ago, create an alternative to addiction and mental health placement through the MAP program. Perhaps we can do that. I just wanted to thank you, Nafisa. Denise, did you want to share?
Thank you, Governor. So my name is Denise Higgins. I'm the legal director at the New Jersey Coalition to End Domestic Violence. And I just wanted to support what you said, Governor, absolutely, about the mitigating factors of domestic violence. And Senator Ruiz, while we do have you here, and thank you for joining. We do have a small cohort in the domestic violence sphere that's been looking to bring a version of the Survivors Justice Act from New York into New Jersey so that those mitigating factors would start to be considered. And I've done a lot of work myself at Edna Mahan. I always say that work has changed my life in more ways than one. So I appreciate everything you're saying, because it is so important for the women to have those connections to their families that they often lose. And the sooner we can get away from Edna, the better. So I appreciate everything you've said.
So maybe perhaps what we can do is, and Allison's been a big part of this, and Rahat Chadha, she's our general counsel. So perhaps with Denise, Nafisa, Allison once again, and again, the doctors, we can look at sexual violence and domestic abuse as understanding, and Chris has said this to me time and time again, it's trauma, 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 but using that as a predicate, the same way we made, frankly, accommodations originally for men for mental health and addiction, perhaps now understanding trauma and sexual violence and domestic abuse as a legitimate predicate for creating a residential alternative to these women at Edna Mahan. So I want to thank my dear friend Nafisa, who always keeps me honest, or at least tries, and also Denise and all the women here, but perhaps we can forward something to Senator Ruiz and Senator McKnight with Gloria's support and Sue Wang's support and Chris. And Allison Acetel has been really patient. But before I call upon my dear friend Al, Chris, did you want to say anything else on this piece? It looked like you did.
No, just nodding in approval and agreement. We can't speak enough about the impacts of trauma, adverse childhood events, and how things that have occurred outside of those acts that led to incarceration truly are impacting the women still, and what we can do to provide more holistic care and really elevate the human experience, right? We don't talk enough about the human experience in care, and a lot of that is understanding each human being, what they bring with them to each care interaction. As Dr. Bachman was saying earlier, really understanding what comes to each care interaction and how we go about to truly ensure equity and justice. And just one last point, this is a little bit of a hot topic for people, but I'm thinking about this population as I'm sitting on the New Jersey Reparations Council, right? And thinking about what are those reparative processes and things we should be advocating for this population in particular, because too often they're stigmatized and left out of those conversations of restoring fullness of rights, fullness of opportunity. So just wanted to put a pin in that, Governor.
Thank you, Chris. I didn't know with the Angela, and then we're going to move on, or Angela or Dr.
I'm sorry. Before you go on to my colleague, I just. Well, Governor, we'll coordinate from my end. I think my policy person jumped on the call. She'll contact Allison. We'll put in a Zoom meeting together. I'll loop in Senator McKnight. Whatever we work on, we'll send it to you all as a draft so everybody can weigh in through whatever lens, because I don't pretend to be an expert here. Allison can attest to, I don't do a bill on Tuesday and get it posted on Thursday. That doesn't make any sense to me. It's about buy-in and making sure we're attempting to do the right thing. We may not get everything we put in it or that we want, but I can guarantee you that with two women at the helm leading the charge, we'll at least move the bar in a positive direction. No disrespect to you, my lovely dear, but to make sure that we move the bar, and then we'll loop in the Department of Corrections, because of course we want to do something that gets done and gets signed.
Thanks, Senator McKnight. Ange?
Yes, well, this has been a beautiful conversation, and as the majority leader said, I will definitely be working with her and the team to make sure that we get language that will definitely help the women. And yes, Senator, we're two women, and we will move that needle. But Governor McGreevey, thank you so much for bringing all of us together so that we can hear what's happening and hear from experts, as well as hear from people who have that one step out the door. So you have my support, and I'm definitely looking forward to what we're going to do together collectively.
Thank you. And as the father of two daughters, I know who's in charge. But Gloria, and Allison knows both my daughters. Gloria?
No, I'm looking forward to all of us coming together, because collectively we're going to move the needle much more quickly.
And it's going to be
individually.
And to go to Senator Ruiz's point, it's not going to be a cakewalk, and it's going to take time, but it's ethically, morally the right thing to do.
Yes.
So I just wanted to say thank you, and I apologize. I'm just trying to be mindful of time. And with that, I just wanted to share my dear friend Allison Acetella. Just in the interest of full disclosure, it was Ruiz's fault that your time has been truncated. So really. Al, can you just give us an update on the
I'm happy to cede my time. Happy to cede my time to the majority leader.
And then we're going to go into the LaFrac micro grants.
Yep.
For any woman who is court involved, we literally have $100,000 to assist women in duress. So, but I'd like to call upon Allison, who's the Senior Vice President of Government Relations, who's our partner with the Volunteers of America. and she has the dubious distinction of working with someone who makes me look good, my dear friend Dale Lombardo. Al?
Thanks, Governor. And you know, just a quick add-on to the discussion we just had. That group of women is also very unlikely to recidivate, right? Which is kind of another argument in our arsenal, as you pointed out, Senator Weiss, because everyone, you know, a lot of folks have kind of that knee-jerk reaction of, you know, we're letting people who murdered other people out of jail, but I mean, we do have data to support that as well. And just to hop on, again, with Volunteers of America, sister organization to NJRC, and we have a really fulsome human trafficking program in Atlantic City where it's a big issue. I know I've spoken about it before, and actually more kudos to Senator Weiss because that's another issue she's taken on. She was kind enough to be our keynote at our summit last year and will be doing so once again, even though it means traveling to very southern South Jersey. But the new news for us is we just got a federal grant for education in 4 school districts. And that will include our staff training with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They'll be learning how to go in and talk to students and parents about things like, I'm preaching the choir on this one, but you know, trauma-informed education, disclosures, best practices for prevention, terminology, i.e. sex trafficking versus prostitution, sextortion, a big issue, especially, you know, with the young kids being online so much, familial trafficking, which I know I ruined Senator Weiss's day by sending her a video from NECMEC that touched on that subject, which unfortunately is all too common. Ends in the summer. So we're really excited. If anyone wants more information, happy to provide. And thanks so much as always for letting me speak.
No, thank you so much. And again, we'll provide all information from Allison to the VOA to all those individuals. And Sharon, you've got down to 3 minutes. Could you tell us what we're doing with the LAFRAC and the micro grants for any woman, any court-involved woman? Sharon?
Yeah, it's a phenomenal program. The Same Sky Foundation, through the generosity of Francine LaFrac and the foundation, generously donated $100,000 for Same Sky emergency micro
Sharon,
grant.
yeah, could you just talk about the requirements to qualify?
Right. So the requirement is any woman who's in an emergency. It could be first month's rent, arrears rent, apartment fees, back utility, domestic violence, housing, assistance, getting places to appointments, to job appointments, interview clothing. So basically, it's women in crisis that needs this emergency funding to get to the next step. And this next step has kept people in apartments that would have been evicted. A mom with 4 children from 2 years old to 16 years old under trauma, just lost her housing, has enough funding that she can't get emergency housing through the state, but we can get first month and security payment to get her an apartment, to make her safe.
Thank you, Sharon. So basically what we'll do is, Sharon, if you could, through Lacey, if you could send out the qualification form for the LAFRAC for the micro grants. And again, this is the LAFRAC Foundation micro grants, or you can reach Sharon directly. Sharon, what's your number, please?
732-322-1045. I'll drop it in the chat.
You'll drop that in the chat. So this is candidly a significant amount of dollars that are used for women in crisis. Only court-involved women, NJRC or VOA or a partner in reentry, cannot utilize monies to privately use the concerns if a woman has a crisis in terms of food or in terms of her apartment. This enables us, in partnership with VOA and NJRC, to provide for women in stress. And as Sharon said, perhaps Sharon, if you could just give a list of stories, maybe for our next meeting, and distribute it so people can understand who these women are, how the LAFRAC Foundation has helped, and just to encourage people, because this is generosity from the Francine LaFrac Foundation. And thanks so much. Sharon, is there anything else?
No. To move forward. So it is a comprehensive intensive case management, giving this money out and making sure it facilitates change.
Thank you. And the last piece today, and we're going to be able to hopefully be on time, is Kristen talking about the circle of care. And Kristen does this with the good Dr. Bachman. Kristen, can you supply just a quick outline of what we do with women as they come back from Edna Mahan, from state prison, from addiction, from veterans, and from county jails? Kristen?
Absolutely. So NJRC, we offer a group-based discussion and activities through our Circle of Care initiative. It is a virtual bi-weekly support group that Dr. Bachman and I facilitate. During these meetings, we discuss topics such as mental and physical health, nutrition, exercise, healthy relationships, self-care, kind of just to name a few. We also encourage them, bring forth any topics that you want to discuss, any challenges you're experiencing. Our goal is to empower them to be better able to care for themselves, navigate the healthcare system, and also just gain support of people who have been through shared experiences. So our groups take place every other Wednesday at 4 o'clock. Our next meeting is next week, the 21st. So anybody you think might benefit, please send them my way. I can drop my number in the chat as well and my email, but we'd be very happy to have anybody in our meetings who might benefit.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Kristen. And again, Sharon with the Francine LaFrac Foundation grants, Kristen with the Circle of Care, Dr. Bachman connecting people directly to medical services, Dr. Wang on the hepatitis, HIV, Chris Purnell in terms of assisting all of our women with these linkages. And again, I want to thank Allison. But to go back to what Senator Ruiz said, I'm grateful that someone will be, Senator Ruiz and Senator McKnight will be able to spearhead this effort on the legislation. And with that, I just wanted to see if there's any last questions.
Governor, can I just ask Allison, what 4 school districts were you referencing? Can you specify?
So yes, if you want to shoot your email, I know Pine Hill is one, and the rest I am embarrassed to say I don't know. I'll have to check with our program folks. But if you want to put your email in the chat, I can shoot it to you.
Thank you. And Sharon's email's in the chat, Sharon McGreevy for Same Sky, for the Same Sky grants. And Sharon, last thing is how much money can we give to a single woman? What's the most?
Well, actually, the criteria is that it is a certain amount of money that the person can stably work towards their next phase. So if it's rent, it's their rent. It could be their down payment, but that they can meet the next rent, or they can meet the next criteria for credentials. So it's very open, but it's part of a plan for stability.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And again, it's been a great honor to have Senator McKnight, Senator Teresa Ruiz. I'm just honored that, having the burden of coming from Brick City, the second best city in the state, that she joined with us. But in any event, I just wanted to say thank you to Kristen, to Sharon, to all the doctors, to the senators, and everybody on this call. This was really special. It's about being an advocate for court-involved women, and I want to thank each of you for your commitment. And Ruthie Byrne, thank you very much. And we always say prayer on the way out, so I'm old-fashioned. Gail, who's got Vera? Do you want to say a prayer? Go ahead, Vera Sansone. And Vera runs one of the best treatment programs in the state. Vera, go ahead. Whatever it is, just a blessing. And you're on mute, Vera. And Vera takes care of our women in Monmouth County.
Thank you, Governor. Just that all of us, I pray that all of us stay safe and that we continue to do the amazing work that we talked about today with those who can't help themselves be able to live successfully in the community just like we do. So.
Amen. Thank you, and happy Valentine's Day, everybody. Happy Ash Wednesday.
That's right.
Thank you. Godspeed. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.